Hello everyone out there and welcome back to the channel. It's so great to see you again. Well, as you guys saw, I recently released my DreamWorks ranking. So now it is time to move on to the Pixar rankings. And let me tell y'all, this list was way harder to put together than I thought it was gonna be. I keep forgetting how like half of Pixar's roster are like just some of the greatest animated movies of all time. I feel like if I was doing a tier list this time, like at least 10 of these would end up in S tier, probably more. And there's only 28 movies. Take the ranking with a grain of salt. And also I just want to make it clear, these are totally just my opinions. I don't expect you guys to have the same ones. In fact, I encourage you guys not to have the same ones as me. If I hate a movie that you love, I don't want to take anything away from you. If you love it, awesome. So let's just all be respectful in the comments, even where we disagree. Yeah, especially because I'm gonna have some really controversial opinions on this one, so be kind. Alright, so with that, let's start with the bottom of the list. Number 28, Lightyear. Which, on the surface, I kind of feel bad for putting Lightyear this low, because I know it's like a competently made film, but my biggest issue with it is that it's boring. I have never been so bored by a Pixar movie to the point I often forget that they made this movie. And I think that's a travesty because the idea is awesome. What is the movie or show that Andy watched to get excited about Buzz Lightyear? I mean, technically, Disney has already tackled this in the past, and honestly, I think they did it better here. But I just can't see any kid getting excited about this movie ever, because it's boring, and if they enjoyed anything from this movie, it would be Socks, not Buzz. Like, the side characters were dull, and I don't remember any of their names. The only one I kind of remember is the dude with the pin, and when I have to call you the dude whose entire defining quality is that he likes his pin, you know you did something wrong. He didn't even like the pin. He was just shocked that his suit came with a pin. And I'm sad I remembered that element. This is just boring and drab, and the time travel is more confusing than I think that they meant for it to be. The Zurg reveal was completely underwhelming and boring. Just everything, I can't use another word than boring for this movie. Because with every single movie above this one, I at least enjoyed it to some degree. But Lightyear, no. Next up, at spot 27, Cars 2. I am surprised that Cars 2 got dethroned by Lightyear, because at least Cars 2, I can say, has some fun moments. The story doesn't totally make sense. It feels very jarring going from Cars 1 to now a spy movie. And yeah, the writing kinda sucks. But I still enjoy Mater as a character. I don't think he's a strong enough character to carry a film like this on his own. Cars 2 just feels dramatically worse than the other two. It feels far more disconnected. Nothing from 2 ended up carrying over into Cars 3. But I can't say it's devoid of all quality because it's at least fun at times. It doesn't make sense, and I'm not super engaged with the story, but it's at least fun enough that I can make it through to the end. But not enough for me to put it any higher than this. So Cars 2, this is where you stay. Now we're gonna get real controversial here. Number 26, ooh, Toy Story 4. I know the Toy Story 4 fans are going to just grab their torches and pitchforks, but listen to me for a second. I can acknowledge that Toy Story 4 in and of itself is not a bad movie. I will say this, I think there were a lot of elements that they included in it that I thought were very interesting and intriguing. If this film had not starred Buzz and Woody and the Toy Story gang, I would have liked it dramatically more. But because it included them, and I now have to compare it to all the other Toy Stories and see this in the overarching story, I can't stand it. I feel like it spits in the face of so much of what Toy Story was meant to be. And I know for some people that's what they love about it. Because much like life, you have to pivot and change in major ways throughout your life in order to survive and thrive and do all kinds of things. So I get it from that perspective, but I still don't like it. I respect it for what it attempted to do, and I respect a lot of the ideas that came from it, but man, I don't like this at all. I do not like Woody here. I do not like Buzz here. I don't like any of the characters from the first 3 movies in this one, except for the ones who didn't say anything. Woody doesn't feel like himself. Buzz doesn't feel like himself. Woody just, man, he just felt unlikable most of the movie for me. What happened to Buzz? Why do you get so stupid? And I know for other people those can be minor details, but for me they really stuck out, and I can't see anything but that when I watch these. And it just kind of makes the whole movie feel sour because of it. So if you love it, awesome. I do respect a lot of what it was trying to do, but man, I don't like it. Next up, we have Brave. I want to love Brave a lot more than I do. I love the atmosphere, I love the music, I love Scotland in general. I'm weirdly fascinated by it. And I love the accents. The accents are so much fun to listen to. Like, I want to get sucked into the story more, but there's something that's stopping me. I don't know if it's the characters, I don't know if it's the way the story's told. I want to be more engaged than I am, and I look at this going, I should be really engaged by this, but I'm just not. Nothing that I think is bad or terrible or horrible, but just enough to make me keep my distance from it, going, I want to love you more, but every time I watch you, I get this idea that you're better in my brain, then I sit down and turn you on, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, and I forgot about that. Oh, that was a good part. Oh yeah, and then I forgot about that. Next up on the list is The First Cars. I think The First Cars is fun. It's a fun idea, it's a fun premise, and I think the movie did fine with it. A little predictable, a little by the numbers, but certainly not awful. I enjoyed Mater, I enjoyed Sally, I enjoyed Lightning when he, quit being a jerk. I like Radiator Springs, I like the world that they've made, it's fine. That's the best thing I can say about it. It's fine. Don't hate it by any means, don't love it. It's fine. Next up, we have A Bug's Life. I feel kind of bad that I put A Bug's Life this low because I do enjoy A Bug's Life, but I do have to be honest, I kind of forget that this is here too. Kind of like with Lightyear, but I had way more fun with A Bug's Life than I did Lightyear, so it goes light years ahead of him because of that. To me, Bug's Life is fine. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. I think it's pretty good. To me, I feel like the biggest issue that it has is I feel like it kind of has a tone problem. I feel like most of the movie is pretty light and pretty fun and lighthearted and jovial. But then anytime the grasshoppers show up, it gets like too dark to where it feels disjointed, almost like I'm watching another movie for a little bit. So yeah, it goes down here. Next up, we have Cars 3. So yeah, we've already knocked out every single Cars film. Cars 3, I think, is the best of all the Cars movies. I thought it had a better story than the first one and was more fun than either of the other two. And I thought that it had some sweet messages to say. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by Cars 3, especially after seeing Cars 2. As you can see, I'm not the biggest Cars fan, but I'm certainly not against the franchise. And it's just fun. There's not a lot more to say about it other than the Cars films are fun. Now next up, we have Incredibles 2. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, the villain really killed this for me. But I will give Incredibles 2 this, it made me appreciate the first Incredibles a lot more. I was never anti-Incredibles, but I didn't understand why everyone loved it as much as they did until this one came out. Now, obviously not to say that this is a terrible movie, because I just said the movies below it were still good. But it does feel dramatically weaker than the first movie. And I think a lot of it boils down to the villain and the wasted potential of the screenslaver. The movie sets up this screenslaver idea with some really interesting ideas that you can't wait to dive into, just to realize the whole thing is a ploy and our real villain is a lot more simple and kind of boring, and honestly has a really convoluted, kind of stupid plan. And I hate saying that the whole movie got ruined because of that, but it kind of did. I was really into seeing Bob have to handle the family, although yes, you can make the argument that was a little contrived for them, but when you're dealing with kids with superpowers, that kind of makes sense. And I loved Jack fighting the raccoon. That was definitely one of the highlights. But yeah, it all boils down to the main plot just didn't really register as much as it did with Syndrome. Next up, brace yourselves. The Good Dinosaur. I know. This to most other people is what Lightyear was to me. Most people saw this as boring and just bottom of the barrel Pixar. and they would put this at the very bottom. And I totally understand, and y'all have a lot of legitimate criticisms around it, totally understand, but I cannot hate this movie. I have a lot of biased reasons. Number one, I adore dinosaurs and prehistoric life. When I'm not working, I'm looking up stuff, watching documentaries. I find it all fascinating, so of course, I'm gonna love the dinosaur movie. Secondly, I grew up in Texas. I have a lot of affinity for Southern and Western culture, and that's what a big part of this was. I'm gonna like it to some degree. And you made Sam Elliott into a T-Rex. I can never hate that. That is perfect, and I love this. I adore this. But as you can see, I still don't think it's perfect by any means, because it still ended up, you know, at number 20 out of a list of 28. But I don't hate it by any means, and I actually enjoy it from time to time. Next we have Onward. Onward is a film that I think does get a little too much hate. I don't think it deserves the level of hate that it gets. Like, it's certainly not amazing. It's certainly not the best Pixar film out there, but I think it's got some really cool moments in it, and I think it's got some really great emotional beats that are, I think, handled pretty well. It's kind of nice to see magic get rediscovered in this world. It's a fun journey for that, and to see how Barley and Ian have grown over this trip and everything. And this also came out at a time I was starting to get into D&D myself, so I related a little bit to it in that way. But I just thought it was fun. Not the greatest movie Pixar's ever made by a landslide, but definitely not the most nuanced characters we've ever had. But it was fun, and it was enjoyable, and sometimes that's all you need. Next up, we have Monsters University. Another film that I think gets a little too much hate. And yeah, I will admit, I love this movie primarily for one scene. Most of it is totally decent and passable, but not a whole lot more than that. But for me, the scene that makes it special is when Mike fails at scaring. That's not something you get a lot. It's always follow your dreams and you're guaranteed to succeed, because it doesn't always happen. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. And it's cool to have a movie where that happens, especially when it starts seeing that Mike wants to be a scarer, but you know, because of Monsters Inc., he's not gonna get there. And that journey of his self-discovery is really charming for me. But yeah, the rest of the movie doesn't quite live up to that one scene in my opinion, but I don't think the rest of the movie is bad by any means. Now next up, we have Finding Dory. Obviously, I don't like it as much as the first Finding Nemo, otherwise you would have seen it by now. But I do think this is a worthy follow-up. I do kind of wish in some elements it was stronger, but I do think, unlike Mater, Dory can actually carry a movie on her own. And she has an engaging enough emotional arc to where that makes sense, and I want to follow this journey. I liked going to the aquarium and meeting those animals. I loved Hank. I will admit, Marlin and Nemo didn't feel like they needed to go on this journey, but at the same time, it would feel weird not to have them, so I get that conundrum. There were some things that didn't quite gel with me, but overall, I thought it was pretty good. Next, we have Luca. Luca, I think, is just a fun, charming adventure. It's not one of Pixar's biggest movies, not by any means. It feels a lot smaller, it feels a lot slower, but I think that's what they were going for. I think that's all intentional. It feels very intentional. And as a bias thing, usually smaller stories don't quite register with me as much as the bigger ones do. So considering it all takes place in a small town, and the biggest thing they deal with is like a small race in town, it's not really gonna get my excitement levels up that high, but I think everything was done well. I liked the characters that we met, especially Massimo. I thought he was a lot of fun. I liked the tension that you get every time one of the characters accidentally turned into a sea monster and they'd have to quickly hide themselves because they got wet. I thought it was well put together and pretty good, but not so good I could put it much higher than this. At number 15, we have Turning Red. Turning Red, I thought, was just a really fun movie. I love the just playing around with some of the art style, adding in some anime references. I loved the heart that came with this, and weirdly enough, I really liked the music for it. I still pull it out every so often. And I will admit there's definitely some nostalgia here because I was about May's age when it was 2001. I was about to enter my teenage years around that point, so yeah, all of that kind of hit home. You know, other than, you know, turning into a giant red panda and stuff like that, but you know what I mean. Next up, we have Soul. Soul is an interesting one for me. Because, yeah, I do find some of the stuff about the great beyond, the great before a little difficult to follow at times, and especially when they talk about how it's like a metaphorical representation and all these things, and it almost was too meta to where I don't know how this world even functions at times. Like, I get the basic premise that you need to know for the movie, but if I start thinking too hard about it, I feel like the whole movie kind of falls apart, so I try not to do that. But when we see Joe get to play with Dorothea Williams for the first time, or when we get to see him fight for his dreams, or when we see 22's reaction to what happened with her mix-up with Joe, those really resonated with me in really profound and awesome ways. And the film almost feels disjointed because of that, but as a whole, I don't think it's bad. I just think that its messaging and the way it delivered things was stronger than everything else. And for me, that is the most important part, so it gets a pass for that. But I do wish the film was kind of more cohesive all the way through. But that's one man's opinion. And next up, we have Elemental, the little film that could. The film that has now the record for the worst Pixar opening to then turn around and pull out a decent profit worldwide. Because I feel like this is Pixar trying to come back to some of their roots, to some of the things that made them extra special back in the day. And I think that they carried it out pretty well. I thought that Elemental did a really good job of telling its love story. I thought it did a really cool job of creating an immense and engaging world. And I feel like when people watch this, they get a far stronger heart than they were anticipating. I know I was. I don't think the trailers quite sold it in the way that it ended up becoming. So I have a soft spot for Elemental. I think it has a really great heart, and I think it tells a story very well. So way to go, Elemental. Now here we come. From number 12 onward, for the most part, were so hard for me to decide where they went that I had to just start getting nitty gritty with a bunch of these, because in my opinion, these are just the best Pixar has to offer, and a lot of these I feel almost identically about. This one was tough. So if your favorite film is in this group, just know at any given day, these could start swapping. Except for number 1, but we'll get there. Number 12, we have the one that started it all, Toy Story. Now I know there are some hardcore Toy Story fans out there that that's their favorite thing from Pixar. It's definitely not my favorite, but I love Toy Story to death. And as you've seen, only one Toy Story, well, one true Toy Story sequel has made it below the top 12. I have a high respect for Toy Story. What can you say about this movie that hasn't been said? It is amazing. It is fantastic. It is everything you'd love from a Pixar movie. But I will admit, like, biasly, there's some parts in it that I don't like, and there's some parts that I am not the biggest fan of, and honestly, when I rewatch it, yeah, the animation doesn't quite hold up as much as it used to. But for me to say that this is bad by any means would be a bull-faced lie. It is still fantastic. Next up, we have Toy Story 2! I promise, we're not going to wrap up all the Toy Stories right away. We got some more time for the next one. Toy Story 2, I thought the same way about Toy Story 1, except I thought it was slightly better. I did enjoy like the storyline of Jessie a bit more. I loved her backstory. I felt there was a little bit more heart, whereas the first movie kind of like laid out the principles of the world. Toy Story 2 is where they got to dive into more of the emotions of the world, and for that, I really appreciated it for that. And number 10, well, some people are going to get on me for this, but Incredibles! Like I said, I was never like the biggest Incredibles fan, but Incredibles 2 made me appreciate the first one so much more. Prior to the Incredibles, I never really got into a lot of superhero movies. I wasn't really watching X-Men, the Marvel Cinematic Universe hadn't kicked off yet, and it really wasn't until MCU that I really started getting into superhero movies. Now that I understand what the superhero movie genre is about, and I've gotten exposed to it, and I get it, I now see that Incredibles is probably one of the best superhero movies that we ever had. Syndrome is just a phenomenal villain. I love seeing the fight between the Omni Droid and Bob, seeing the family dilemma stuff happen. And the older I get, the more I understand Bob's story, and the more I find it really relatable. So I totally get where this movie's coming from now. I think this is one, just the older I get, the more it starts resonating with me. I feel that way about a lot of Brad Bird films. I feel like you can't appreciate them, or at least I couldn't, until I was older. So it kind of makes me want to give Iron Giant another chance. I haven't watched that in years, and I've always thought it was pretty good, but not amazing, so maybe I should give it another shot. Next up is Monsters, Inc. I adore the world of Monsters, Inc. I think the relationship between Mike and Sully is just superb. I love Randall being the villain, but then also having a twist villain on top of that. I really love the world that they built. Everything made sense in this capacity. It was a breath of fresh air, and such a cool idea that the monsters in your closet are scaring you, but they're doing it just to get energy. I just think that's such a cool idea, and that's never left me. So Monsters, Inc. will always hold a special place in my heart, and will at least always be top 10. I refuse to let Monsters, Inc. go lower than top 10 in a ranking. Number 8 is Pixar's most recent, Inside Out 2. I thought this film was just awesome. I was so scared that this film wasn't going to live up to the expectations of the first one because of how much I loved it. And although I don't think it was as good as a film, I did feel a little more emotionally responded more to this than I did the first movie. It had some amazing moments in it that I will never forget. I thought that the new emotions really played a great part. There were so many tropes in Inside Out 2 that I thought for sure they were going to fall into when I first saw the movie, but they didn't, which thus made the film more engaging for me and really made me understand the dilemma that the emotions were going through. So yeah, Inside Out 2 I thought did an amazing job, and I was so happy that it did the first movie justice to that degree. I was so happy with it. Next up, we have Toy Story 3. Yes, this is the last Toy Story film that we're going to talk about, but hey, it made it to number 7. That's no small feat. Toy Story 3 was by far my favorite of the Toy Story movies, and in my opinion, where it should have ended, but we don't need to go down that road. Toy Story 3 did what the first 2 movies was setting up. You have to deal with the fact your kid is going to grow up and leave you. What do you do? What does that look like? It felt like the true culmination of the series, and the way they did it, I thought was just phenomenal. Like, yes, you could say the prison heist thing kind of ran on a little too long, and yeah, I can see that some of that kind of lost the plot there for a bit, but I don't care. When the plot was there and it was really going strong, oh, it was beautiful. It was the perfect way to finish off Toy Story, in my opinion. I don't think there was a better way to finish it, especially now that I've seen Toy Story 4. I stand by that. I think that was the best way you could have finished this franchise, but we'll see what happens with Toy Story 5. Who knows? Maybe they can change my mind on this, but as of right now, I still think that. Number 6 is Coco. I recently rewatched this, and I forgot how good it was. Not to say that I ever thought the film was bad, but had this been a few years ago, I might have put it at the bottom of the great list, and now it's about midway through, because it's just really good. The characters all really gel. There's some great twists and turns. The music is fantastic. The animation is fantastic. The world building is awesome. The voice acting is great. I have nothing but great things to say about this movie. The only thing I might have to nitpick on is the fact that I feel like a family completely avoiding music for 4 generations seems a little far-fetched, but it's a movie. At some point you gotta have some level of suspension of disbelief. And because they handled that premise so well, I'm willing to let that slide. But it's not even that big of a thing. Now we get to the top 5, and number 5 is Inside Out. Just, in my opinion, one of the most perfect Pixar films that there is. It did such a cool job of explaining how the mind works, how the emotions work, and to see just how many healthy emotional coping mechanisms that they put into the movie to help teach that, sadness is a good thing and can lead to joy. It was just so tightly written. I thought all the characters really did well. There was a great message about growing up and how painful that can be. I feel like this was one of these premises, everything you'd want them to do with a premise like this, they did and then some. I just can't get over how awesome I think Inside Out is. Number 4 is WALL-E. Truly a masterpiece. This is absolutely a masterpiece of a movie. I know a lot of people, they kind of tune out at the beginning because there's not a lot of dialogue or any dialogue at all, but that's one of the reasons why I love the opening so much. I almost want to say that the rest of the film can't live up to the first 30 minutes in my opinion, but I think it does. WALL-E has an amazing story about love and about just understanding the world around you and not being so complacent with what the world shoves in front of your face. And there's so many great elements within this movie, and it's all handled so well. You'd figure a movie that has such an obvious message to say as far as taking care of the planet would be boring and preachy, but man, they did it so well here that I almost forget that that's a part of the movie. So just one of the most beautiful animated movies of all time. WALL-E, just incredible. Absolutely phenomenal. Now, number 3, Finding Nemo. I can't tell you how many times I watched this when it first came out. It was on repeat for me. This world just clicked with me. These characters just clicked with me. The storytelling was phenomenal. The emotions were amazing. It's Finding Nemo. In my opinion, one of the great masterpieces of Pixar. It had the right level of humor, the right level of heart. It just felt like everything was firing on all cylinders, and just across the board, they had this perfect equilibrium of just balance between comedy and seriousness and dramatic storytelling and fart jokes. It just all blended so well. Yeah, for just a comedy movie, I can't think of many better. It just feels like one of those perfect movies. Just phenomenal. The animation is still gorgeous today, which is saying something because the film came out in 2003? Was it 2003 or 2004? I don't know. It was one of those years. And number 2, Ratatouille. Much like other Brad Bird films, this one took a while to really grow on me, but now that I'm adult, especially now that I'm adult working in entertainment, wow, this film has a lot to say. And I feel like this film has so much to say to anybody who works in any creative field of work, whether that be cooking or art or filmmaking or just anything that involves the creative process. There's so much here. And I feel like that is a big part of my biasness towards this. That speech with Anton Ego at the end of the movie, that alone put this movie this high for me. The rest of the film is phenomenal and I love it. And over the years, I just see more and more of how great this movie is and how much it has to say and how beautifully that it says it. And it really just shows me, yeah, Brad Bird is one of those directors that takes me a while to really love what he does. But when I love what he does, it's amazing. Now, remember I said earlier that almost all of these films could be interchangeable depending on the day? This is the exception. Number 1, Up. Up has impacted me more in my creativity than any other Pixar film ever has. And in fact, it is my second favorite animated movie of all time, being surpassed only by The Lion King. That's how much I love Up. This movie feels like it was tailor-made for me. It has everything that I love in this. It has dramatic heartache. It has big laughs. There is a jungle adventure with animals we've never seen before. We have animal companions who can talk to us. But it also has some of the most emotional storytelling that I have ever seen in an animated movie. And it is gorgeous. And I'm so glad that this film got nominated for Best Picture when it came out. And it wholeheartedly deserved that, in my opinion. I've heard a lot of the critiques over the years that some people have said that the first 10 minutes are so good that it makes the rest of the movie weaker in comparison. I don't agree with that. I do acknowledge it takes a drastic shift in tone, but I think it was a tone that was warranted, made sense, and honestly uplifted the film. Pun not intended. To me, I see this as just one of the most perfect animated films ever made. I have no notes. I can't find any notes to say about it. I struggle to find constructive criticism. This is what I want every movie to be. I want every movie to make me feel like Up did. I want to laugh as hard as I did with Up. I want to cry as hard as I did with Up. I want to be as invested with every character in every movie as I am with Up. So yeah, with that, I don't think any Pixar movie has soared higher than Up has. So with that, that is the end of the list. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what are some of the ones you agreed on, what are some of the ones you disagreed on. But remember, keep it civil, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye! And big thank you to all of my Patreons. Without you, this channel wouldn't be what it is today. Thank you so much.